So if you've been a lifelong Nintendo fan like I have, you've definitely seen this company go through roller coaster waves of being at all-time highs of success and having basically problems just keeping their consoles in stock and meeting demand for people who want to buy them. And then you've also seen them hit incredible lows like the Wii U console generation, where there was a lot of rumors going around suggesting that Nintendo might go the way of Sega if they had another failure of a console generation following up the Wii U, and we're just going to see them produce their games and not the console hardware anymore. And obviously, as we talk about the end of the Switch 1 generation and transitioning into the Switch 2 generation, there's lots of eyeballs on what Nintendo is going to look like from a success standpoint with the launch of this follow-up to an extremely successful generation that is the 150 million plus install base of the current Nintendo Switch family of systems. And while we don't have hard numbers to look at just yet, we do have a few different data points emerging online suggesting that Nintendo is not only going to be off to a great start in this console generation from a sales perspective, but actually set to make history, as it does look like they are already doing that, and this console will indeed go down as the fastest selling video game console ever, period. And that's what I want to dive into today. Look at all of the different data points that are suggesting this online, talk about some new Japanese retailer stock confirmation that looks like, even despite Nintendo's best efforts to supply adequate launch demand over there and around the world, they're not going to come anywhere close to really truly satisfying that day one stock from the sounds of things. In addition to analysts now chiming in with new pre-order estimates and just how many millions of units we will see come from that inventory alone, besides your day one walk-in consoles that will be sold in addition to it. And yeah, we're looking at a historic situation here. So we're going to break down all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we are also giving away a Nintendo Switch 2 console on this channel once we hit 90,000 subscribers. All you have to do is be subscribed. So just subscribe and enjoy the videos, and you may win a Switch 2. But with that, I want to first hop over to VGC, where you can see the following write-up on screen, which outlines kind of a high-level prediction of what's going on in terms of the total pre-order amount of systems that are set for launch, and how this is going to go down as probably the best console launch in history. Nintendo Switch 2 will be the biggest console launch in history, analyst predicts. PS4 and PS5 are tied for the biggest console launches ever. You have previously, analysts had predicted that Nintendo will likely produce between 6 and 8 million units of the console by the time of the June launch. Now, an analyst claimed that the console's incredibly popular pre-order campaign in Japan may point to the Nintendo Switch 2 enjoying the biggest console launch in history. As Japan accounts for a third of the global Switch install base, it implies 6.6 million pre-orders globally, said Pelham Smithers of Japan-focused equity research house Associates via Bloomberg. At the time of writing, the two biggest console launches in history both belong to Sony, with PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 tied at reporting 4.5 million units during their first 2 months on the market. It's worth noting that the PlayStation 5 faced constant stock issues during its first year, meaning that the PS5 would have likely eclipsed the PS4 if the stock had been available. Earlier this week, Nintendo President Shintaro Furukawa warned that a significant number of players in Japan will miss out on the Nintendo Switch 2 pre-orders after 2.2 million applied for its My Nintendo pre-order lottery. Pre-orders for the console opened in the US this week, with players reporting constant issues with attempts to pre-order the console online. Pre-orders in the UK and Europe went live earlier this month following the Nintendo Switch 2 direct presentation. And then we have basically a similar article, but this one just having a little bit of different numbers to look at as well, where it says analyst predicts an unprecedented 5 million Switch 2 units to be sold globally in its first week. Okay, so you have this one analyst saying 6.6 million pre-orders is kind of where they are leaning as far as the data that they have to go off of right now, which would just in pre-orders alone put it far past the PS4 and PS5 at 4.5 million units launched during its first 2 months. Then you have a separate analyst saying that, yes, it looks like within its first week, there will be eclipsed of 5 million unit sales sold for this. So both very big numbers, obviously. And if those numbers do indeed end up becoming a reality, kudos to Nintendo for trying to supply that much stock to begin with. That's already like a massive number to hit production wise, which is probably why we saw a lot of the leaks that we did for the console ahead of time before those official first look trailers and everything, because Nintendo was actually ramping up production of this thing a lot earlier than they typically would for their marketing campaign and things like that to kick off, because they knew they had to stockpile these things at large quantities before they even started the pre-order and marketing phase of promoting the console. So now that we have these, early data showing 6.6 million pre-orders potentially, on a global level, and I think they're kind of using Japan as the 1/3 of the market, so it may not come down to exactly that, but I think whenever you line that up with the other analysts predicting 5 million sold in its first week, and then we have really these large stock allocations hitting all over, but still, despite that, you have pre-orders just essentially being sold out everywhere. And Amazon being an interesting retailer that's not carrying Nintendo Switch 2, it does seem like their stock was probably divvied up between the other retailers, but literally all the retailers sold out. And even at high levels of support like GameStop, where they were getting maybe not a true average of 100 consoles per location, but it did seem like a lot of locations were on the up end of 60 to 70, 80 consoles in some cases. And then you had some stores that were well over 100, you reporting numbers like 130, 140, 150 per store location. All of those sold out, and that's a lot more launch day stock than what we've historically seen from different console launches over time. 20 to 30 consoles per location is pretty much a norm, or the norm for prior console generation launches. So Nintendo really did deliver a lot of stock to the market day one, and for pre-order levels and things like that. And even in my own experience live streaming the pre-order drop with you guys, I definitely realized that yes, it was just as messy from a website crashing, can't tell if you're going to be able to check out or not type of situation as the PS5 stock launch was. But I will say that the Nintendo Switch 2 seemed to stay in stock quite a bit longer. And even from polls that I've seen online and everything, it seems like about 70% at this point on average of consumers that tried to pre-order the Nintendo Switch 2 actually secured their pre-order. So it's not everybody, and they definitely still didn't meet all the demand that's out there, but they're gearing up for a historical gaming console launch here, which is very exciting because you want to see Nintendo do well. That obviously means that the life cycle of this generation and the quality of the games that we will see throughout it will be positively impacted by it. And now Nintendo is kind of evolving into an even bigger multimedia juggernaut with like their theme parks and their movies helping propel them to new heights with average consumers. So I then want to take a look at a couple of other headlines briefly to kind of back up just how big of a deal this is right now, where you can see this next Go Nintendo article where it says Japanese retailers see massive Switch 2 stock allotments, but demand still far outpaces supply. The system is going to be tough to come by. And it says what we have learned about the Switch 2 so far. Well, in terms of sales, it seems like the Switch 2 is going to be ginormous hit out of the gate. The system saw its pre-orders sell out pretty much instantly around the world, meaning Switch 2 will be extremely hard to come by at the launch for those who didn't get an early purchase. Apparently, the situation might be at its worst in Japan. Anecdotal evidence points to retailers in Japan getting huge Switch 2 allotments for launch, with one Yokado, however you say that, probably butchering that, but the store getting 320 units for launch and another store getting 125 launch units. That might seem like a sizable batch of Switch 2 units to have at launch, but pre-order lotteries show that those numbers don't even come close to sedating demand. The Yokado store may be getting 320 Switch 2 units, but their pre-order lottery tells another story. One pre-order hopeful noted that their ticket clocked in at 6,000, meaning that the demand is at least 18 times higher than supply. Again, that's based on one pre-order lottery ticket number, but there's no word on just how high the lottery participants climbed. The situation is on a smaller scale with the second store we mentioned, but it still points to major supply issues. While the store is getting 125 launch units for Switch 2, we know that at least 900 people have signed up for the pre-order lottery. In other words, there are going to be a lot of disappointed Nintendo fans come June 5th. So that is very interesting because despite Nintendo's efforts to actually supply this thing and have as much day one stock as they can, whenever you see numbers like this, where basically over in Japan, what you need to know is that the lottery system is kind of how they do it for pre-orders and for basically everybody, as opposed to us here in the US where we were all just ready to go at the launch time and trying to add the console to the cart and check out with it as fast as possible. You pretty much are just playing a lottery system over in Japan to get your pre-order secured, and you're randomly selected on if it's you or not. But whenever you see these numbers, like 18 times higher interest in pre-orders than the supply that the retailers had available, and then Nintendo's own president Shintaro Furukawa making a post recently that we talked about, just straight up telling people in Japan like, hey, we're not going to have enough stock for this thing, and we do apologize, and we're going to roll over registrants that signed up for interest into the next wave of consoles because we just can't meet all the demand. You know, Nintendo tried to brace for this, but it is truly a console that so many players are waiting for. And one thing that's going on in Japan that's absolutely helping their market there, that I do want to point out as the last point of reference with the article as well, is that you can see this from VGC, which says less than 3% of Japanese players trying to pre-order Switch 2 want the region-free version, survey suggests. So you might know that Nintendo did actually do a cheaper version of the Switch 2 for domestic only version of the Switch 2, essentially because it's locked to Japan. You can see earlier this month Nintendo announced the Japanese domestic only version of Switch 2 will be the only version available to purchase from general retailers in Japan. The domestic only console will retail for a cheaper price of 49,980 yen or 334 USD, and will only have Japanese as the console's language setting, and the only Nintendo account that can be linked will be one created with that country/region setting to Japan. Players who want a region-free model will have to try the Japanese My Nintendo store, where a more expensive Switch 2 model with multilingual support can be found priced at 69,980 yen or $467. So quite a bit higher of a price point for the Japanese market than the lower cost one. But you then have this interesting data point, which is that this X user surveyed nearly 60,000 players who had entered Nintendo's lottery to pre-order a Switch 2 console from its official My Nintendo store. As spotted by Automaton, 69.7% of these surveys said that they applied for the region-locked Switch 2 bundled with Mario Kart, while a further 27.5% said that they applied for the region-locked Switch 2 console on its own. This left just 2.9% of respondents who said they applied for the more expensive region-free multilingual version exclusive to the My Nintendo store. So that's definitely helping things in Japan over there. And, you know, I think that Nintendo knew it would help them sell more over there. And it might be like part of like a loyalty to the Japanese market because they are a Japanese company, to give them a cheaper option to get into this next generation ecosystem. And or I think the value of the yen or the conversion rate, it's very weak right now. So that may just be helping the average consumer over there be able to actually afford these things. But of course, that 450 price point, even globally, we had a lot of talk around it when it first hit, but nonetheless, pre-orders sold out across the globe. So even in regions where we don't have that cheaper model, we are still obviously seeing, you know, all around the globe, the stock's not going to be able to meet demand. But the question remains to be seen is how long of the legs does the Switch 2 console have past this launch window and initial hype window? And right now it looks really good, and I think it's going to continue to be good, especially as we learn about more first-party exclusive Nintendo games throughout the rest of this year, and how Nintendo will pad out the rest of their launch lineup. And then you get to holiday season and you have that whole chaos and rush of people who will be wanting to buy the console around then. So yeah, history in the making right here, right now for Nintendo, and it does look like we will be breaking and shattering just about all the records of any previous console launches in history in terms of how fast and how many units this Nintendo Switch 2 console will sell. But let me know in the comments down below how you're feeling about everything. Are you somebody who's still on the hunt for a pre-order yourself? Were you able to already successfully secure one? And what games are you most excited to check out on the Nintendo Switch 2 right at the console launch? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.